Conduit. This is Conversations about Housing with KCR and the Bremerton Housing Authority. This is going to be our first meeting of the year. Unfortunately, I had to reschedule our first meeting of the year. So terrible. However, it was for a good cause and a good event. But we are here now. So I'm super excited to catch up with our fine friends in housing and see what they have going on. So we're going to go ahead and bring on Jill Stan. Let's go ahead and give her a round of applause. Happy New Year to you, Jill. How are you?
Good. Happy New Year. Good to see you. I feel like it's been a while.
It has been a while, right? Like all kinds of stuff happened at the end of the year, snow and ice, and yeah, but we're
Did
here
I hear
now.
you asking for money from the legislature last night?
You did. You'll hear me asking tonight and twice tomorrow, too.
I was very proud of you. I heard that on the radio and I'm like, go, Marwan.
Well, I appreciate it. So, and I've never done that before. That was my first time. So, how did I do?
I thought you sounded great. In fact, I didn't hear the part where you introduced yourself, but I realized really quickly who you were and you talked about your program. So I thought you represented well and did a great job. Good. I was very impressed.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I will
Mhm.
continue to do that over the next 2 days and see if we can maintain those resources here in Kitsap County because that's super important.
Great.
All right, let's bring on Katie Sharp. Happy New Year to you, Katie. How are you?
Thanks, Marwan. I'm doing good. I think we were just talking about how it's amazing how busy it is right now, but it's also exciting. So let's get right into it.
Oh man, there is undoubtedly a bunch of updates today. So, we need to kind of recap last year, talk about what happened in the last 2 weeks of December, and get into kind of like New Year's projections for 2023. So a lot on deck there. Who wants to go first?
So is Matt waiting in an empty room?
Is that what he said?
That's what he said. Maybe he's just using the wrong link.
Matt has not been on in a very long time, right? So let me go ahead and send him the link really quick here. Oh man, the crew is all here. Back in the old days, they would say, "Hey, the gang's all here."
I'll tell him you're sending him another link.
Okay, he should have it now. All right,
Do we
so
know if Kirsten's going to be here?
I don't. I sent her the link yesterday, and normally it's our deep dive time, but either way, it'll be okay since this is our first meeting. Figure we've got a whole bunch of stuff to
Oh,
talk.
yeah. I know the
Yeah.
county is really busy as well. There's a lot going on with Project Connect and the point in time count, things like that, too. As you know, I know you mentioned those a few times on several broadcasts.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And while we're waiting on Matt to come in, there's still a little time. They still could use some volunteers for the Bremerton point in time count, but they have volunteers for every other location, which is good. And then Project Connect is coming up. Starts on my birthday, Tuesday, January 24th at Gateway Fellowship out in Polsbo, and then Wednesday at the Salvation Army, and then it will finish off Thursday at Port Orchard Methodist Church. If you need more information, you can contact Terry Schroeder at getsthatprojectconnect2000 at gmail.com. And that should be a great event. And so we're looking forward to participating in that and getting folks the resources that they need. So we're
well,
super.
Bremerton Housing Authority will be there all 3 days.
Hey, hey,
So
hey.
we weren't going to just because we don't have a lot of emergency services. However, we first on this podcast, we're opening a waitlist on January 27th.
What?
Yes. So
I love it.
we're opening several. It's our project-based voucher waitlist. So I'm putting a notice out here shortly to the paper. It will be in the notices section as well as updating the website. But this is the first time we've announced it to the public, but we want to make sure that everybody's aware that, again, it will be through Rent Cafe. And this is project-based voucher. And the biggest difference is, I guess there's two big differences. You have to live in one of our properties for a year, and then you have a choice to have a voucher, and it's limited. And also, it's not date and time, so you can apply anytime during January 27th between 7 and 3, and you can it'll randomly sort the list after it closes. So.
Oh, would you mind putting some of that in the chat? Now we have another person to welcome, and that is Kirsten Jewell. Let's go ahead and give her a round of applause. Kirsten, how are you doing?
Thanks, Marwan. I am doing well. If the rest of the year is busy, January is probably the busiest month for us of all time because we are trying to close out all of our grants that wrap up at the end of 2022. We're trying to do a whole bunch of federal and state reporting. We're trying to get ready for the point in time count, and we're trying to support the efforts of the Homeless and Housing Coalition in organizing Project Connect. So January is super, super busy.
Yes, it is. Well, Happy New Year to you. We're so glad that you're able to join us. We just got done talking about Project Connect and the point in time count and the.
Oh, good. Sorry, I missed that. I apologize for getting on a little bit late. I was just trying to wrap up another end of the year project. So.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Everyone is super busy January. Were you all this busy last year, January? Because I wasn't. I was busy, but I wasn't busy like this. This is kind of crazy.
Just as busy. Just as busy.
Just as busy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. It's during the pandemic, we took on a lot of additional work managing some state and federal grants to support COVID relief work, and they all have really rigorous reporting requirements. So all that KEPA money that we've talked about so many times, we have to do all this federal and state reporting and grant wrap up and all that for that. So it's a lot of additional administrative work on our divisions, and a lot of it happens in January. So super busy.
That's kind of how it goes. Right?
And then also the legislative session started. So that in, and some of the state policy work that I'm involved in really starts to ramp up right now as the state legislature kicks off its regular session.
Yeah, Jill surprised me. She said she heard me testify yesterday.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wow. And that's a long meeting. So to catch me in that whole time. But yes.
I didn't listen to the whole meeting, but I did catch you this morning. They played you on the radio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What were you testifying on, Marwan?
Bringing resources here into Kitsap County and the block grants and how that needs to, remain. Super important.
Thank you so much for doing that. We really need to keep the pressure on. There was a new survey. I just got an email this morning. There was a survey that was conducted by, I think, the state and the Puget Sound Regional Council. That's something they do every year, and they survey citizens about kind of what their top priorities are, and housing was the top priority. So we need to keep the pressure up on the legislature to make sure that it is a top priority for them as well in terms of funding. There's a lot of challenges with some of the temporary pandemic funding going away partway through this year, and that will leave some really big holes in the programs that we've been funding. So very concerning, and need to make sure we figure out some ways to keep those funded.
Absolutely. Well, we have one more person to bring on, the one and only, the great and fabulous Matt Garrett. Let's go ahead and bring Matt on. Happy New Year to you, Matt. How are you?
What an introduction, Marwan. I'm fired up. I don't deserve it, but that was a I'm just psyched for that introduction.
Well, we want you to be pumped up. We haven't seen you in a while. How you feeling? Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Yeah, I know it's been a little bit, and I know I've missed you all on the podcast. I've been out recovering from some back surgery and some back issues, and so it's good to be back. It's good to see you, Marwan. It's good to see you, Katie, Jill, and Kirsten. Good to see y'all.
All right. Well, like I said, this is going to be an episode of kind of recapping and updating. We haven't been on for a while, so I'm sure there's quite a bit of information we'll just kind of go in order. We'll start off with Bremerton Housing Authority, and then Kirsten with the county, and then we'll finish off with Matt with KCR. So, Katie or Jill, who would like to go first and jump on in?
Katie, you want me to talk about the project-based vouchers?
Sure.
Okay, so we've talked about this for a while, but on Friday we will be issuing a request for proposals for project-based vouchers projects. So these are the vouchers that are attached to units. This is different than opening the wait list. We are going to be opening the wait list for project-based voucher projects that we currently already have project-based vouchers in at the end of the month. But on Friday, we're going to issue requests for proposals. So if there's projects out there that are already in use, but you could use project-based vouchers for your operations, we'll be accepting proposals for those as well as new projects. We're going to be issuing it for both Bremerton Housing Authority and then another one for Housing Kitsap. And for Bremerton Housing Authority, we're going to be issuing it for 50. For Housing Kitsap, I believe we're issuing it for 49. It may be 50. We're still trying to figure out if we have one more available. But so that's exciting news. I know there's some projects that will be coming in, but I don't think there's going to be 50, but we'll see. We're looking for projects. Well, we would love to have projects that are currently in use, but if they're new projects, we're interested in those as well. But we wouldn't want to hold vouchers for too long. So we would be looking for projects that are underway. So not something that's just in the planning stage.
All right, that is huge.
Yeah, it's exciting because we've been really thinking about ways to utilize our vouchers. We've been really successful in the last 2 years. I think we've talked about this. We've at last count, I looked at it just this week, we had almost 200 more vouchers in use than we did in January of 2021. I'm getting my years confused. So, I mean, that's pretty incredible. Now, 65 of those were project-based vouchers at Pendleton Place, but still, like, it's just phenomenal that just being focused on this voucher utilization, how well we've done. And so we continue to do that. Issuing the project-based voucher RFP is one of our strategies. We're also kind of just dipping our toes in preferences. So we have a lot of preferences that we've outlined in our admin plan, and we are trying to figure out the most equitable way of implementing that strategy. A lot of people are finding out about it. Matt, you'll be hearing from Andy, because we do believe that the most equitable way is to continue to work through the Housing Solutions Center with referrals with whatever organizations we're working on. But a lot of people are asking about it. What's great about the preferences is that when an agency identifies someone that fits one of those preferences and they put a reference into the Housing Solutions Center, many times that agency is giving them the support that they need to either find a house or they may already be in a house. And so we tend to see that the people who come on to our program through this preference strategy tend to be more successful than people that we just pull off the wait list. That being said, we also want to be equitable to people we're pulling off the wait list and not have this very different way of people kind of jumping to the top of the list. So we're doing it with as much of a thoughtful process as we possibly can, but with also the thought of we don't want to be not utilizing vouchers that could be utilized otherwise. So there's that. I think the only other thing that I'll update people on, just I found it super exciting this week, and I know Kirsten will like this too, is that we just requested 5 more vouchers for the Foster Youth Independence program yesterday. So those are vouchers attached to actual households that once we get them, that our partner Olive Crest will be working hard to get them housed. So that will take us up to 18 of our original 25. So that's
Nice.
special for Kitsap County.
Let me give you a horn for that. Cut you off while you're talking. That is a huge deal. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. That's just a huge deal. That is
It's huge. It's like one of all of our favorite things to work on. So it's just incredible.
Kirsten, did you read it Inside Funny?
I'm just happy about that. It just makes me really happy. That program has a very special place in my heart, and foster kids have a very special place in my heart, and just one of those programs where it really is a demonstration of community partners coming together, thinking creatively, problem solving, and very successfully being able to wrap services and housing around extremely vulnerable youth and young adults so that they can have a good start in life with stable housing and resources to help them stay stably housed. So I feel like that program in particular is one where we're really making some amazing progress, and every single one of those 18 households that's getting housed, and many of them include children, is breaking the cycle of poverty and homelessness. So I love that program.
You know,
not that I don't love all my programs, but that one in particular, it just makes me smile every time I think about it, because it's.
No, what's really peculiar about that, which is so great, is the joy that came over your face listening to hearing that news, right? Folks, they really do care. It really is important to them, right? Yeah, she couldn't hide it. It was like, man,
Yeah.
this is just fantastic news. So you get to see those genuine things. So back behind the scenes, folks are working hard, but they're passionate. You know, they really do care, and they're doing as much as they humanly can. So I
And
appreciate.
Marwan, if I could just add, a lot of the work that we do is bureaucratic and administrative, and we're working behind the scenes to make funding available or to support programs that we can contract out to our amazing partners like Kitsap Community Resources. And one of the cool things about that program is that we sometimes have the opportunity to get feedback from our Olive Crest partner about the direct impact that it's making in the lives of these youth and young adults. And so we get to hear directly what a big difference it's making in their life and how it's going to really change their life for the better. And that's really gratifying for those of us who spend a lot of time behind a desk pushing paper and being in meetings to kind of see the direct impact of all of that work that we're doing creates joy.
Absolutely. So now, Bremerton Housing Authority, Katie, do you have any other updates before we move on to?
As you saw, I sent you that little private chat about the project-based voucher waitlist opening. We talked about it a little bit earlier. It's really just decided. You are always the first to hear it, so I don't have any flyers yet, and I don't have it on the website, although I always encourage everyone to go to bremertonhousing.org/rent-cafe and registering for Rent Cafe if you're not already on. If you are on, make sure you have access to the email, make sure you can log in. All that effort is worthwhile, because when you do want to apply, you just have to log in real quick, fill out the quick 5-minute application, click the submit button, and you'll be on the wait list. It is not based on time of application, as long as you submit it between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. on January 27th. And that's why we are attending the Project Connect fairs in all 3 locations on the 24th, 25th, and 26th to get more word out about what Rent Cafe is for, how to register, and to get word out about the wait lists opening for project-based vouchers. Again, lots of things happening this month around project-based vouchers. And the idea is you'll have to live in one of our properties if you get selected and are determined eligible. And then after a year, you'll have an option to move or stay with a voucher.
All right.
Marwan, can I just add one thing? It's not about the project-based vouchers, but just something for people to know is of the 38 emergency vouchers that our community received, 32 are leased up now, and 5 others are underway, at least shopping. 2, I believe, are waiting to pass inspection. So we're on target to have all of those leased up. And you may recall that when we originally got those vouchers, we lost 14 that we were supposed to get because of the underutilization of our program, and I was livid. And and so because HUD, the way they calculated it is if you're underutilized in your other program, they kind of, well, I called it punished us, but they asked me not to use that word. I can't remember the word they asked me to use, but it wasn't punished. But anyways, now that we've just worked so hard at getting this done, we still have to have our monthly meetings with HUD, but I don't think we're underutilized at all at this point. And there are new
Nice.
vouchers coming out with the new budget. I believe there's 12,000, which is less than last year, but I'm really hoping that when they come out, we'll get everyone that should be allocated to us because of what the community has been able to do. So that's great news.
Joe, can I ask you, how do they determine, like, if the vouchers went down this year, you're getting 12,000 this year? What are those factors? How do they come up with those numbers?
I last year there was the emergency vouchers because of the COVID funding. There was a lot more. They were able to offer a lot more. This year, that funding isn't there. It's my understanding, but they still funded more vouchers. So now, and 12,000 is actually a lot because in previous years before COVID, it was rare to get that many. So it's more than before COVID times, but it's not. I don't think they're going to come down as emergency vouchers, although I don't know.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
Jill, I have a quick question. Sorry.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Well, I was, when they passed the Inflation Reduction Act at the federal level, I was really scanning that for any help thing. You know, we did one of the big pieces that did not ever get passed in the last federal legislative session was the human services part of it. You know, they passed the kind of infrastructure part of it, which was awesome. And they passed a bunch of sort of manufacturing assistance, but we never got the human services included increases in housing. But was there anything in that Inflation Reduction Act around increasing the number of vouchers? Because I thought something in there, but I might have been mistaken.
I don't know. I didn't see anything, but I can go back and check.
Okay. I may be wrong. I was just hoping that they'd put something in there, but I'm sure we'll hear about it if that's true.
Yeah.
Right.
Jill, when would we know if we have more vouchers that kind of, even if they're not called the emergency vouchers, but I think it's such a good concept to pair vouchers with case management, right? It's just so much more successful in that model and getting all the community together. But do you know when that would happen if more come our way?
I've been waiting to hear. I really don't know. I would suspect it won't be too long into the year though, but I have not gotten any information from any of the industry advocacy groups or anything. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just with everybody else waiting to hear.
When you talk to your HUD folks, did they give you a high five for turning it around, or what? Were they impressed, or were they just don't care?
So they're impressed with us, and
Okay.
I mean they are very impressed. We have our big meeting tomorrow, but now of course it's don't go into shortfall, don't spend too much money, so we can never just have a yay, you're doing great, keep going. But and they've got their job to do too, so I get that. But
Sure.
we are going full-fledged until we can't. And the simple truth is we were gonna have money taken back from us from going back to HUD because they offset housing authorities that don't spend all their money. Well, we have shrunk that down by over $1.5 million. So I mean, between the fair market rents and just going and doing rent increases and then just having so many more vouchers leased, we have really decreased our offset chances. So I'm anxious to talk to HUD tomorrow. We were on the watch list for a while. I don't know if we're still on it. I haven't heard, but I can't. I mean, if we are, it's only because probably from the opposite side of watching that they don't spend too much. But we'll just keep going here.
That sounds ominous. We're on the watch list.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's, I would rather them pay attention to me so that they know that we need money and we need vouchers in Kitsap County. then I'd rather them know who we are than not. So I'm okay with it.
Facts. I love it. I love it. All right. Any other updates from the Bremerton Housing Authority before we move on to the county? All right. Kirsten, you are up. What is new in the zoo?
I mean, I think I kind of touched on this when you first introduced me, but you know, our update is we're working really hard to wrap up our end of the year accounting, bookkeeping, reimbursement requests, and contract closeouts. So basically, what happens is the county sort of overarching administrative office sets a deadline by which we have to have submitted all of our expenses for 2022. And so then we turn around and set a deadline for all of our subcontractors to submit their reimbursement requests for 2022. So we can have some time to process those and get them submitted to our financial office, and then they can pay everybody, and then the books get closed. And once those books are closed, nobody's getting reimbursed for 2022 anymore. So it's an enormous amount of work that happens in a really short amount of time. I was talking with Leah, who does the majority of our reimbursement request processing, and she said, you know, we had a deadline of Monday for our subcontractors to get reimbursement request turns in. I think she said she had 60 of them to process this week alone. So huge amount of work for her. And we basically get all hands on deck. Everybody from our division pitches in and tries to help however we can to get that giant amount of work done. So it's like basically doing a month worth of work in 1 week. So that is taking up a lot of our time. The other thing that we're working on is doing the reporting for some of our federal PIPA grants. So we're closing out the first Treasury grant, and that has an enormous reporting requirement with it, which is very complicated. So that's also in the works, collecting data from agencies about, you know, what the results were, and then there's a financial component to that, and reporting on all that and closing out that grant. Contracts keep going. We still have a bunch of contract amendments going. The ones that are really urgent that get processed right away are in the works, as well as all of our homeless housing and affordable housing grants, which are sort of 2-year grants. We write a grant contract for 1 year. For the second year, all of those renewals are happening right now as well, which is another huge chunk of work. So suffice to say, everybody in our contracts team is really, really busy getting all those different pieces done. At the same time, we are working on preparing for the point-in-time count. You might remember that last year we subcontracted out some of that work to Anton Pressinger and the amazing Northwest Hospitality, and they did a great job. This year we decided to take it back in-house. Nothing that Anton did wrong. I mean, they did a great job. It was just that we felt like we had the capacity once again to do it in-house. Particularly because we have the HEART program and all of our program partners now. There's an amazing difference between the number of dedicated outreach professionals that we had a year ago and what we have now. We have, you know, a dedicated encampment outreach team contracted at Kitsap Community Resources. There's 2 contracted through the BHASO as part of the REAL team. And then there's sort of assorted other outreach professionals who are also doing work in the community. So I am very happy about how much planning and coordination and work they're doing to try to make sure that we do the best job we've ever been able to do with our point-in-time count outreach surveying. We're still looking for a few volunteers to help with that from the community. In the past, we've had more than 100. I think we had about half of that sign up so far. So we're really concerned about not having as many community volunteers with the point-in-time count. But the time to sign up to volunteer is really getting short because it takes a lot of work to coordinate all that volunteer effort and make sure everybody knows where they're supposed to go. We send people to food banks and meal sites and doing outreach work and the Project Connect events and all of that. So
Kirsten, before you go on, can
Mhm.
I ask you just to
Yeah.
talk about, since we're here, what if I wanted to volunteer, what would I be doing, to try and encourage folks to sign up for this?
Yeah, for sure. So just a tiny bit of background for any of your listeners who may not be familiar with the point in time count. This is a federal and state requirement that every fourth Thursday of January, we do our very best to try to find and survey as many people as we can who are living unsheltered in our county. So that's people who are living in encampments, on the streets, in the woods, in RVs, in their cars. Um, People who are doubled up with family and friends are also counted if possible. Um, and the way that we do this in our county is we send out teams of volunteers who are trained and are generally going out with an outreach professional, or at least somebody who has some experience working out in the field. And we ask them to try to find people who are living unsheltered and ask them if they're willing to take our survey. And the survey is like essentially a one-on-one conversation. So the surveyor, who is the volunteer, will just be willing to take a survey. We're collecting information about homelessness so that we can provide that information to state and federal funding sources so that we can hopefully get some more funding here in Kitsap County. And then they just ask them some basic questions about their how they identify gender wise, how they identify race wise, what was their living situation most recently, who's in their household, things like that. And then some information about what their experience has been trying to access resources around housing in Kitsap County. It's pretty short survey. It's a personal conversation, and then the person signs a release saying that they're willing to have their information be shared, and that's really it. So the volunteers are going out and basically conducting these surveys. Some of that surveying is done at food banks. So people coming into the food bank will get asked if you're experiencing homelessness, or where did you stay last night. Some of the surveying takes place at meal sites where people might show up. A big chunk of it happens on Thursday morning. We have all the volunteers gather in different parts around the county, and that team will then divide up into groups based on where we know there to be people living outside. And then we have a big chunk of need to do surveying at our Project Connect events. In fact, I know in particular that we're short volunteers at the Bremerton Project Connect to do surveying. So we also need interpreters. We want to make sure that when folks come in and maybe would prefer to take their survey in Spanish or another language, we have a way to help them be able to do that. So we're always looking for interpreters who are also willing to volunteer for a couple of hours.
What languages, Kirsten?
What's that?
What language?
Typically, Spanish has been the most often asked for or requested one. I think if we have any Hmong speakers, that would be great as well. I understand that Hmong is not a written language, so you can't really get the surveys translated into that language. So somebody would be interpreting for the person and then completing the survey for them. So those are the languages that I'm aware of that are commonly needed at the Project Connect event. And we do have we have in past years had quite a large number of folks who were Spanish speaking or Hmong speaking that wanted to take the survey. So looking for volunteers to do that. And it can just be for a couple of hours. It doesn't have to be a long day of surveying. And then the other reason why it's really helpful to have interpreters is that these Project Connect events, right, are these big services fairs with like tables with all kinds of amazing resources available. And most of the people who are representing organizations at those tables don't have other languages besides English. And so if I'm, a Spanish speaker and I would like to access any of these resources, I can't necessarily communicate with the people that are offering those resources. And so what we've tried to do when we have enough interpreters is that after the Spanish speaking household takes the point in time count survey, we will ask if their interpreter will just accompany them around the Project Connect event and help them navigate accessing these resources by interpreting as they're meeting with different representatives of organizations. And so 1 year, I think we had 5 or 6 interpreters, and it was fantastic because it meant that they could spend a lot of time working with each of the households and really helping make sure that they could communicate and access those resources. So
Kirsten, let me ask you something else I think is super important here. Homelessness is an issue nationwide. It's not unique to us, and we know that the numbers are growing. Can you connect with the audience on why it is so important to get as an accurate number as possible and what that means in regards to hopefully putting a dent into our unhoused population?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I have to say the point in time count is a very inaccurate measurement tool. We fully acknowledge that. One reason is it's impossible to do exactly the same methodology year to year because all of the circumstances around what we're doing changes. But it is still the primary way that the federal government kind of determines what the level of need is in your community. And so they look very hard at those point in time count numbers to determine how much funding they want to make available for the state block grant programs and some of the entitlement communities directly. So one of the things that they use to plug into their formula of how much money is getting allocated around the country is point in time count numbers. And so there is a relationship between us doing a good job trying to count as many people as we can experiencing homelessness and how much money comes to our state for homeless response activities. One thing I'll add is that we also count people who are living in homeless shelters as part of the point in time count, but we don't have to survey them directly because that data is all collected within the homeless management information system through the shelter that they're staying in. So we aren't required to survey them differently. That information is sort of automatically collected. We try to collect information about people who are doubled up, staying with family and friends, but very difficult to do that. We try to do that as much as possible at the Project Connect event. But a lot of people who are doubled up and staying with family and friends, we don't have a way to really find them, or maybe they don't think of themselves as meeting our definition of homeless. So we definitely know that that's an undercount as well. But the number that the federal and state government are primarily interested in people who are living unsheltered.
Good. So yeah, that is critical. Did anyone want to jump in there and just kind of bolster, the importance of this count, BHA or KCR?
I had a question.
Go ahead, Katie.
So isn't it usually on one day? So this time is a little different because you are surveying every day, correct?
Yeah. So
yes.
the great question. And the way it works is that we are trying to determine where people, so it's called a point in time count, right? So you're trying to kind of figure out how many people were homeless during this 24-hour period in your community. But there is broad recognition that we just don't have the resources to find everybody within that 24-hour period. And so like many counties across the country, we do our surveying over the course of a few days, but we're trying to pinpoint where people were staying on that one particular night. So when we survey somebody, we'll say, where are you going to be staying on this night? Mm-hmm. And it's always that Thursday night in January, or the fourth Thursday in January. So some of the food banks aren't open on that Thursday or Friday. Some of the feeding sites are only available on different days of the week. So we do our very best to try to collect information about where people are staying on that one particular night. And we work really hard to also unduplicate our surveys. So just in case somebody gets surveyed at a food bank and then they also get surveyed, at the tent that they're staying in, we try to collect enough information and we have to try to unduplicate that so that they're only counted one time. Jeff has a great comment in the chat about it's not scientific and give them a really big number. And I think there's definitely a recognition that this is an undercount. We have to provide data for each and every person that we count. So we can't just say, oh, it's 300 people. We have to actually enter data into the database, the homeless management information system about every one of those people. Most communities that I talk to, generally think that we may be able to find, a quarter to a third of the people experiencing homelessness. So sometimes when you're trying to make a real estimate of how many people are homeless during that one night, you might multiply it by 2.5 or 3 times to get a more realistic number.
Wow.
Because the reality is that we don't find everybody, and not everybody will take our survey. So we do our best. We try to find as many people as we can, but we don't find everybody. This year, I feel like we have a really different situation because we have the HEART team and we have the REAL team and some other outreach professionals who have actually been working over the past year to develop relationships with many of the people who are living outside. So instead of a stranger coming up and saying, hey, will you take my survey? This year, a lot of those interactions are going to be with somebody that they know and have talked to many times before, and there's already this relationship there. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do an even better job this year collecting surveys, particularly from the people that we are aware of in encampments already. And so again, that's a great thing, but it's a change in methodology, right? It's not the way we did it last year. So my attitude about it is it's a useful number as a window into homelessness. Trying to compare it to what happened last year is not a very useful exercise because the weather can dramatically affect how many people are willing to come out of their tent and talk to you, or whether we found a large encampment or not will affect our numbers significantly. So I sort of always caution people. There's these charts that show the year-over-year numbers, and I always just say, like, it's kind of interesting, but really what we're paying attention to is the number of people that we found this year, and we know that that is a minimum number of people that are trying to survive outside.
I appreciate that. And you were going to make a comment, Matt. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. That was great. I mean, yeah, Kirsten has the best information on the point in time count, has been doing it the longest. I was just going to say I know a lot of our team really enjoys getting out into the field, especially some of the folks that aren't in the field often. And I know Jill, one of the first point in time count, or 2 years ago maybe, but Tim from BHA was on my team, and we were slugging through the mud, and it was a really intense day. It was raining, but it was a good bonding, team bonding, but also really good just, I think, for folks that might not be in the field as often, right? And I put myself in that, is to actually be out there and actually see what people are going through and talk with folks. And so I think it can be really rewarding. It's a really exhausting, long day, but I think it's really rewarding and so important because even, Kirsten, I think one of the best stats that we get from that, and I use it too, is there's some folks are hesitant to want to invest more into homeless services because they think that just attracts more people from Seattle, right? We hear that all the time of ferry people, but our numbers from the point in time count are very steady. If that's like less than 20%, is that right, Kirsten? Like 80% of the folks have a connection, or were a resident, or have a reason for being in Kitsap, right? They consider this their home, and so it's really nice. And that data comes from the point in time count, and that's a really good data point to say, hey, this is we're taking care of Kitsap folks, right? Sure, there's always some transient population, but it's not like it's 80%, right? It's not like it's the reverse where we're taking care of a majority of transient folks. These are Kitsap folks mostly that we're taking care of.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, what other updates do you have, Kirsten?
Well, I think you talked a little bit about Project Connect, right, before I got on the call.
Absolutely.
So just to reiterate, that's another really big initiative by the Housing and Homelessness Coalition. There's a great team of people working on it. We haven't done Project Connect events for a few years. I think we've missed the last 3 years. And so excited to be bringing those back, and also a little bit at a deficit because we haven't been doing it for a while. So we're kind of having to refigure some stuff out that we usually have just got like clockwork happening. So we're really asking for everybody's help to try to advertise those events to anybody who is experiencing homelessness, struggling with housing instability, or very low income and wanting to connect with resources. There'll be a hot meal served at all 3 events. There'll be outdoor gear provided to folks who are living outside, vaccinations, connections with jobs. I mean, you name it, there's a huge amount of resources that are being available to anybody who just wants to stop by and chat with somebody and find out what's out there. So really excited to be able to be part of that team, and grateful that there's such a great group of folks working on it. Shannon Turner from Peninsula Community Health is one of the chairs of that and is doing a great job around.
Yeah, shout out to Shannon.
Shout out to Shannon. Yeah.
All right, so that information is there, and let's go ahead and move on to Matt from KCR. Matt, what is happening?
Oh man, it is good to be back, Marwan. I missed you. How are you doing, Marwan?
I am blessed and
How's
highly
G2?
favored. Oh man, it is. We have been slammed this year, but it's been great. Like Jill said, I testified last night. I'm gonna testify tonight, right after this is over, and twice tomorrow. So already doing things that I haven't done before. So crossing things off my bucket list that wasn't even on the list. So hey, it's pretty cool. But I love the avocation, and it's a good experience. And then we broadcast it out so we can give other people the experience and just encourage people to, take action in their own democracy. And I think it's important.
Marwan, can I just ask you a quick question about that? Are you doing that as part of the Washington Locum Housing Alliance? Is that how you got involved with doing that?
I got to give a shout out to Tony Ives, the KCR executive director.
Cool. Mm-hmm. No, that's great. I just say that because the Washington Locum Housing Alliance has a really amazing program where they'll recruit and train people with lived experience and kind of advocates for housing and homelessness issues in local counties. And they provide this extensive training and support and information and resources. And so, if there's other folks in your audience who are interested in getting involved in that effort, they are amazing and can help teach you how to testify effectively, how to talk to your legislators, how to write letters, really how to make your voice be heard.
Kirsten, would you mind putting that information in the text box so I can put it on there?
I mean, yeah, I can just point people to the Low Income Housing Alliance, but I will do that now. Yes.
So I'll just say, Matt, before I hand it back over to you, right? Tony told me about it. What was yesterday? Wednesday? So Tuesday, right? So I didn't actually have a lot of prep time. Now they are very helpful. So there was a script, that I had some language there. So you had 60 seconds. City council is 3 minutes. 60 seconds. I'm like, I'm doing this thing and I'm trying to add, my piece in there. And I couldn't get it under a minute and 20 seconds. So I saw a few other people take some liberties. So I took a few liberties myself, and mea culpa. But I got through it. So we'll see what happens tonight. But I didn't want to, speed read. I didn't think that was going to be effective. But do practice.
You're a performer, Marwan. You can't rush it, right? You got to go through the process.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was, and to second what Kirsten was saying, the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, they do a fantastic job. I worked with them to testify on behalf of the buy and for component last year, and to get that into the legislation, and it was really great working with them. And I actually went through. I got bumped, so I didn't actually talk with them, but I was able to submit written testimony. But I was in the queue watching it, and so even just watching the process. And there was actually better people advocating than me to talk. There were so many renters there that were talking about their experience with programs, which is much better to hear from, program administrators. So it was a really good process. And yeah, big shout out to the Housing Alliance. And yeah, that's awesome you did that. I'm definitely open to doing stuff like that again. It's really important.
Absolutely. Well, what's happening at
So,
KCR?
man, there's so much, and I know we have 10 minutes, so I will try to go quick. So I have some data, not complete data. So I'm sorry I can't break it down officially, but I've got a little bit for you, Marwan, because I know I couldn't show up here on the first day back without data. So
I've been struggling without my data, man.
I know. It's part of your regular diet. So let me help a little bit. So with our KEPA program, so last year, so KCR, we kind of got the official. We knew it was going to be above 15 million, and it was. So it was about roughly $16.5 million we sent up to our fiscal department to help with rents, to help with utilities, eviction prevention work. So that is just a massive number, and a big shout out to everyone that's involved in that. That's about 2,300 duplicated applications. We don't have an unduplicated count yet, but that is about 2,300. So, because that includes each time we pay a rent or utility, right? So a lot of folks have multiple. So as soon as I get, hopefully we'll have maybe in a few weeks, we'll have some official end of year numbers where you really can dive in. We'll have Elizabeth take a look, but I did want to share that because that was a huge magnitude. There it is. Yep, get the horn. HSC processed about 7.8 million. The legal, this was a little bit of a surprise for me. I knew they were chugging along, but legal referrals. So HSC meaning folks that just came through the normal waitlist process. Now that's a little lower than probably we thought, because remember we closed the waitlist in July. So that's about half of the, kind of just folks that could sign up for it, coming to HSC, coming through the website. So that's maybe that's why it's probably lower than we thought. But our legal partners referred to us $5.8 million worth of assistance.
Oh.
So that's all folks that were on an eviction track. So folks that were Dispute Resolution Center, Kitsap Legal Services, or Northwest Justice Project made those referrals. So that is a really large amount. And that's when we kind of changed procedures towards the end of the year as we were starting kind of spend down. And then definitely last but not least, the buy and for 2.7, almost $3 million from our buy and for referral partners. So that is fantastic. So I know we're really happy with those numbers, and I'll have a little more breakdown of unduplicated counts, and we can actually look at people down the line. But definitely just a big shout out to everyone involved, because that is just massive, to the county, to Surviving Change, Hope 360, you all, Marwan, Gather Together, Grow Together, Mount Zion, Kayak, and Foundation for Homeless Poverty Management. This is a big lift, and I think this is, Kirsten, for one program, that's probably the biggest for one program in a year. Do you know of any, like during the Great Recession, 28? I know some money came through, but not on this scale.
No, that's about, I would say like almost a 10 times order of magnitude impact in our community. I think by the time we wind up the program, we'll be upwards of $30 million, which is an enormous amount. One of the things that we'll be doing as we wrap up all these programs is compiling a final statistical survey on, some statistics on the overall number of households helped and the amount of money that went to landlords and utilities and all of that. But it's been an enormous effort, and I am so honored and grateful to be working with such an amazing array of nonprofit partners that really pitched in and stepped up and made it happen.
Nice.
Absolutely. And so that is what I want to announce. We're getting the word out there right now, is that we're having to do a strategic pause right now. So currently we're still only taking referrals from our legal partners, and for folks that are in the eviction process. We're even doing a brief pause there as we're in our spend down phase. And part of that's because we're moving from our one grant source, our TRAP funding source, to our ERAP. And those two are very similar. So from the outside perspective, you wouldn't really know much different, but internally we can't just kind of swap as easily as we did before. So we need a strategic pause to spend down our TRAP dollars and get that completely spent, which will probably happen throughout this month. And then hopefully we'll resume and kind of spend the rest of ERAP. And we're still really in spend down comparatively, right? There's not that much money left relative to how much, money we start with, relative to 16 million. So we probably will continue. If that changes, we will definitely let folks know. But we really, right now, anticipate just kind of working through with our legal partners for the, as long as the money lasts. But even right now, we're kind of in a strategic pause mode. That's kind of how we see the next few months. If any of that funding levels change and we do, open it back up to the public, we'll definitely know. But that's really not our plan right now. So did you have any more to say on that, Kirsten, or any feedback?
No, I mean, I think KCR and our other partners have done a great job trying to allocate and commit and spend down as much of the money as possible as we wind up the year. And then we'll be taking what the outstanding commitments are to landlords, what the kind of legal partner flow looks like for their referrals, and then try to strategize about how to kind of mop up with the last little bit of money and figure out how to keep helping people as long as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Marwan, do you have any questions? I usually have some really good kind of questions, clarifying questions with Keepa.
No, I think that's really good. We knew the end was coming, and now we're, on the other side. Those numbers are phenomenal. It just speaks to, one, the need, but also, the fact that there's going to be a continued need as we go forward. And so that's always been my concern that I've kind of shared in our discussions here on this platform, that you see the magnitude of assistance that folks it needed to have. And so it was great to have that money flow in. But, I'm just concerned of the gap as things stop and, what happens on the other side. So
it's going to be a really dramatic funding cliff coming up on us all when all the pandemic money is gone and all of the kind of extra money that got allocated and collected is gone. And then we're left with less than we had before the pandemic. And that's going to be very difficult for us to be able to continue to help people at the level that we have. It could, potentially result in having to even more carefully make those impossible decisions about who you help and who you don't help. And that's really where the advocacy at the state legislative level is really critical this year, to make sure that they know how much we need to keep funding our homeless crisis response system and build on the good work and programs that we created during the pandemic, so that we aren't forced to close those programs all down for lack of funding.
Absolutely. And we've talked about a little bit, and Kirsten and I talked about, there will be a very small version of, I don't even want to call it KEPA, but of eviction rent assistance.
It's totally different.
Yeah. So there will be some, but it's such small. We're talking on the order, 10% of probably what, KEPA was. So a lot smaller. It's going to be much more targeted. It's not going to be this open up to the public kind of wave, right? It's going to be very targeted kind of program. And so we'll definitely, as we flush that out, we'll let folks know. So there is something, but yes, the cliff is real. And I've got some more numbers even from the housing side that we'll talk about in a second.
Oh,
but
nice.
I did want to give a shout out to our energy team. Julie, the manager there, doing a great job helping pick up, some of the, as KEPA winds down. So the energy program is open, and Marwan, you flashed the website and the number there to get assistance. So they are helping people now and taking applications. So if you are, it is a little more document heavy. It's a little different program. And it's targeted to very, very low income folks. And so they've got some a little more specific requirements. But it's always good to inquire to see if you qualify. And the website's the first place to go. They've got some good information there about just some of the basic qualifications, so you can self-screen. Now, something we're really proud of.
That's KCR.org/energy, just for those who are driving.
And then the last thing I'll talk about is our rapid. You got to go, Jill?
Yeah, I'm going to go. Great to see everyone.
See you, Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
Okay.
See you next week.
Bye. Okay. See you next week.
The last thing I want to talk about that we've really ramped up, that's been a big, again, we were kind of worried that we're going to spend it, and now we're worried about overspending, is our rapid rehousing program. So this has been a little bit tougher because it's not KITSAP, it's not KEPA, right? It's not eviction prevention. So this is actually moving homeless households and individuals into, so this is true kind of homeless services. And it is more difficult, right? Because we're having case managers work with families, work with their barriers, and it's not just folks in a home. It's always easier to spend eviction prevention than it is rapid rehousing. But we have done so between our hotels and our CHG rapid rehousing and PSH programs, so we've spent over 1.6 million in homeless assistance. So that's folks getting off the street and that's a lot just last year. So just last year, $800,000 that helped 71 households in hotels. And about half of those are chronically homeless folks from Veterans Park and other encampments. So that is a big number that we are really, really proud of. And I just ran those numbers today. Again, kind of unofficial. Elizabeth hasn't screened them yet, but just as everyone knows, a little caveat, might change a little bit, but we're definitely in the ballpark. So that's in
Matt,
hotel. Yep.
Can I just say one thing really quickly on that?
Yeah.
Just to compliment your team, especially. I was just chatting with Jared, our heart coordinator, and he was telling me that he had heard that more than 15 people who were living in Veterans Park, last March, have now moved into permanent housing and signed leases.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that's amazing. I don't have the exact number, but it's something around 15. And it just blew me away to think that would not have happened if we hadn't had the heart program and the emergency motel program and the amazing KCR staff and case managers working so hard with these individuals to really get into permanent housing. It's an amazing story. So congratulations and huge thanks to you all. There's really good things happening when we can put these different resources together, and we've got such amazing staff who care so deeply about helping folks.
It's a victory for all of us, Kirsten. You're right, and it's a big victory when we all. That's why I love bragging about the, FYI, the vouchers for kids that are aging out of the foster program, because that is everyone, right? It's BHA, the county, it's us, it's Olive Crest, right? Like, it's so many folks. And Veterans Park, very similar, right? It's the county, it's us, it's Bremerton Housing Authority, because some of those folks are going into Pendleton Place or other subsidized units, right? It really is this team. It's the real team, right? It's this big effort. And a lot of that's happened recently. Last month at the Real Team Policy Coordinating Group, I announced 10 because the Real Team, they're asking for some success stories, and like now it's a huge one. And now it's 15 of those veteran parks. And these are chronically homeless individuals, like folks that have tremendous barriers, and have just the stories you hear from them. It just breaks your heart. And not all are success, but that is a really high number considering we moved about a little over 20 into a hotel when that encampment was closed. And so to have, now, not all of them might, make it that long, but at least initially to even get into permanent housing and a shot to stabilize, 75% is well above the, what we would have expected for a program like this. So thank you, Kirsten, for calling that out, because that is a big success of all of us, really all the partners working together. Even the rescue mission of helping us, at the Quality Inn and some of the work that they've done there. So it really is a big team effort to do that. And that's what's really unfortunate is we don't, for 2024, we don't really have an idea of money on that scale, right? $800,000 that can change out this hotel program. And this hotel program, it's difficult. I'm not gonna, there's a lot of times where it's hard, and we really appreciate the hotel partners that are working with us, but it has been a vital stop to help folks transition, especially when shelters aren't necessarily a good option, or there's reasons why they can't be in a shelter, or the shelters are full. So it's really been an extension in some cases of our shelter program. And then they have intensive case management and kind of working that until permanent housing. And even the hotels have helped. There's families too. So the other half of that is families that are waiting for an apartment, right? So we've been using the hotel on that side too, of kind of a stopgap, where shelter's not necessarily a good fit. And so, yes, we really hope that there is some more money coming from the legislator to maybe not completely, but because this system of having the flexibility, this type of numbers really, really goes a long way. So there's the 800,000 almost equally with our rapid rehousing program, just under about 760,000. And that's money of putting households into actual permanent housing. And that's 137 households that went into
Really?
permanent housing with our rapid rehousing program. Yeah.
Wow.
Last year. So that's a lot of households, and that's a lot of work from the housing team that got, again, not quite, might change a little bit as we kind of do our audits and whatnot, but pretty close. Those are folks enrolled in the rapid rehousing program, and most of them are in permanent housing right now. And then the last program that we hardly ever talk about, but I need it because there's been so many successes lately, is the PSH program for families. So we have a permanent supportive housing program for families. And the legislators set this aside, I think 2 years ago, Kirsten, the CHG, PSH, CHF program. I think it was around 2 years ago they set aside money for it. Is that right?
Pandemic, I think it was before the pandemic.
But before, you're right, it probably was before
I feel like the pandemic years are the lost years, right? Whenever we're thinking about things that sort of are like these lost years. But I think we had PSH, CHF before the pandemic, but it got a little lost in the shuffle with all the other pandemic work.
And chronically homeless families is something that doesn't get as much attention as chronically homeless singles, right? Because a lot of times, the kids aren't with them, or, they're bouncing between shelters or whatnot, and it's not as visible, but it is a problem. And we see families like this, and a lot of times we try to get them in our housing units, but this program has been amazing. And yeah, last year we were able to help 12 families ongoing. And what's great about this program is it's for the most vulnerable families, so chronically homeless families. So that means the head of a household has been homeless or unhoused for a year, or adding up to a year for the past 3 years, and they have a disability and or low income, so they're under 50% AMI. So they have all three, very significant barriers, and there are families in this category, in Kitsap, and more than we're able to serve right now. But it took a little bit because to get kind of identify these families, and the program was a little bit slow off the start, but now it is going really well. We do expect to spend down, and there's 12, and actually I just heard even this past week I think about 3 or 4 more hopped on, so it's probably more like 15 or 16 families, and this is permanent. So this is like a housing choice voucher. It doesn't, as long as it is funded by the legislator, it will continue. And so this is long-term support for families, for these families, and really in recognition of the barriers they face. And we do see that there are some families that short-term assistance is just not enough. They really need long-term support. So so that is, I know I went a little long, Marwan, but that's kind of our updates and some things to celebrate and some things we got going on right now.
No, that's cool. So there's a question, and I have a couple questions or comments for you. So in the chat, will you be expanding to downtown Bremerton? I guess with rapid rehousing, because that's when you were speaking when that chat came in.
So we work with a lot of those folks. So we don't exclude downtown Bremerton. So we work with all of Kitsap. So our rapid rehousing program is eligible for anyone in Kitsap. The issue is right now, we are starting to get into a funds issue. We're going to probably have to look at our funding for rapid rehousing, which is good. I know, Kirsten, you and I were worried about spending that, and I think we're going to be fine, the latest projection, which is good. So we'll have CHG completely spent. But for the longest time, the issue has been case manager bandwidth. So that's why we have to limit, because we can only have so many on a caseload, right? And staffing has been a piece that's been a challenge for us. But we have staffed up. We've actually, since I've been gone, there's 2 new case managers we've hired and another coordinator. So we've got another leadership position, and that's some of the reasons why we're really starting to roll right now, and have been for the past few months. And so that's some of the issues. So it's not that we aren't. It's not that we're not going into downtown Bremerton. It's just usually a prioritization and capacity issue, and those referrals come from HSC, and they usually prioritize by vulnerability. We also look at some of the work that I meant Hart. Sorry about that. Oh, is Hart expanding into downtown Bremerton? Got it. Very different question. So the Hart team right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Kirsten, but when they're doing official Hart policy, it's on county property, not city property. So when they're doing official kind of Hart business and encampment work, and especially if an encampment is closing or we want to try to relocate or try to work with an encampment, that happens on county property, not the city, just because of jurisdictional issues. However, we do have outreach teams that will go out to downtown Bremerton frequently. And even the Hart team, when they're helping out, as long as that's not interfering with the other duties, they will go to some of those spaces. I know Jared has even gone to city spaces at time just to kind of help out as needed. So we have a team approach, but for the most part, Hart is on county activity. But Kirsten, I'll let you.
Yeah, that's true. The Hart team is a county program, and we don't have any jurisdiction in the city limits, so we can't take any specific action in the city. And I think the city also has different policies around encampment response. But as Matt said, it's a team effort here, and there's other outreach efforts that can happen. We just don't have any jurisdiction. All of the programs that we talked about, all the housing programs, the EMP, the rapid rehousing, all of that is open to people all throughout Kitsap County. So there's no restriction on that. It's really just in implementing county encampment response policy.
So do you believe that
Jeff's saying there is an intent to cut off services when more needed in downtown Bremerton? I'm not sure I know what that means. Oh, he says the last shelter is closing. Do you mean Salvation Army?
Yes.
Shelter. Yeah, that's because the Salvation Army does not, well, two reasons, does not want to continue to operate a shelter in downtown Bremerton, and the funding to operate that shelter 24/7 is all pandemic funding, and that's all going away. So it's not that we don't want to offer services or we don't think that they're needed. It's just we would need, number one, a nonprofit that wants to operate a shelter in downtown Bremerton, and a big chunk of money from the state or some funding source to be able to pay for that operation. So it's not a lack of wanting to or the desire to cut off resources. It's just the particular challenge with what we've got going now.
Do you think it would be
people have told me there's an agreement to stop serving people downtown? I don't know anything about that agreement. I'm sure there's rumors flying around, and that's unfortunate, but it really is, the Salvation Army's decision that they are needing to take a break from offering a shelter in a building that wasn't the original intent, and they've been graciously doing an amazing job since the pandemic started. And we're super grateful for that. I don't know if people remember, but before the pandemic started, there was no year-round shelter in downtown Bremerton. It was a severe weather shelter only, and then a winter shelter. So we, I think, like Matt was saying earlier, the pandemic has definitely given us a ton of resources to offer more services, and that has demonstrated how much more need there is out there. And then when we return back to pre-pandemic or less funding, because some other funding sources are expiring, it's going to create this really big contrast between what we were able to do when we had millions of dollars more to operate these temporary shelters and to have a lot more eviction prevention and rental assistance and all that, to then all of a sudden not having that available. And that's why there's a really big need at the state legislative level right now to advocate with your legislators to not let there be this funding cliff. Don't let us fall off the funding cliff. Provide some state level funding to cushion that and have an off ramp so that we can figure out how to keep helping people the way that we have been.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to understand what we're dealing with now with the resources we have, and the fact that it is going to be a cliff and it's going to make things worse. And it, yeah, please reach out. That is important, because if we don't tell the state level, we don't tell the feds, they're not going to know, right? Exactly.
Yeah, and we're doing everything. We're doing everything we can at that right now raising the alarm bells about how urgent it is that the state take some action on this, but it really takes everybody stepping up. And, you can just testify like Marwan's doing. You can do something as simple as calling your state legislator and saying, we think housing and homelessness is a priority. You can write letters. You can make phone calls. You can go sign in favor of bills, which you can do online. There's a lot of different things you can do to just get the message through that this is an urgent priority to not have this funding cliff. Yeah.
Since the HART program is a county program, would it be prudent for the city to create its own HART program, or what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think the city does have some policies around how they address encampments. I thought I saw a draft of one a while ago when we were putting together the HART policy, but I mean, just globally, there isn't consistency between the way that the county and the various different cities address encampments and people living outside. And so that's the reason that the county created a policy to have a written set of guidelines and sort of steps and practices that we go through that are in compliance with all of the state, all of the legal precedents that are set around responding to encampments. And so I know the city of Port Orchard was drafting a policy. I haven't seen a final version of that. I haven't seen a recent version of the city of Bremerton policy, but that policy really determines like what the city or the jurisdictional response is going to be. How are they going to, when there's an encampment and it has to be on the county or public property, right? We don't have any jurisdiction over private property, right? So when it's on public property, what does that jurisdiction want to do about that? How do they address it or work with people? You hear about sweeps in different jurisdictions, and that's all based on whatever policy that jurisdiction has around encampment response. So when you hear about the city of Seattle sweeping encampments, that's because they have a policy that's what they're going to do when they come across an encampment. So I think there's definitely some more coordination work that could happen. And obviously we are totally game to share what we've learned and talk about what's been successful and not successful. But ultimately the city needs to come up with what they want their encampment response policy to be, and then how they're going to implement that.
We definitely appreciate you sharing that information, because as an outsider, we don't understand, how things work and the bureaucracy that's built in. And so it's like, why isn't anyone doing anything? It's like, well, this is the reason why this doesn't happen. This is the reason why this happens. This is the amount of money
honestly,
that goes here.
The vast majority of it is I think comes down to really a couple things. One, we don't have enough resources to help everybody, right? So we have to make these hard choices about who is going to get helped and who's not going to get helped. That's one challenge. The second challenge is that all of this work is done by amazing nonprofit partners. And when they are completely consumed with doing the programs that they already have, or they don't have the capacity to take on more projects, or they don't have an interest in taking on a particular kind of a project, it's maybe not in their mission, or it's not what their strategic plan says they're going to do, that program doesn't exist. And then, the last thing is we have a lot of community pushback anytime we try to have a program, that helps people. There's a huge need to get community support for these programs and keep doing them. And part of that community support is making sure that there's enough funding. So all of this comes in. If we had as much funding as we needed to help everybody that we needed, and we had full community support to do the things we needed to help people, these problems would not be, we would not be here talking about this today. Yes, Jeff, be a YIMBY. Yes, totally.
Yeah. So last question for you, Kirsten, before we throw it back to Matt. Last question before I throw it back to Matt. Any word on the permitting for the shelter in Port Orchard? Any good news on this other side of New Year?
Well, the good news, yeah, sorry, I forgot to talk about that. That's definitely happening in the background as well. We did get the last of the main 3 permits submitted, the building permit, which is sort of what all the remodels that we're going to do inside. So that's huge. And now it's a matter of those permits getting approved. And there's many levels of requirement that are the state that you have to have this approved and this approved and this approved. We did pass our national environmental review, our NEPA, which was awesome. And that's a comprehensive review of environmental impacts that the project might have. And that was passed. So that's good. And, we're just stepping through the many steps that it takes to get a project of this size done.
Again, I appreciate everyone coming on, Kirsten coming on every second Wednesday, and KCR with Matt, and then Katie and Jill with the Bremerton Housing Authority. I think it does 2 things, right? For those that, are NIMBY, right? Not in my yard, right? They get an understanding of what the numbers are, what the policies are, what the restrictions are, right? And gaining that understanding is very helpful. For, again, from the outside, you don't know, so you make a lot of assumptions, right? And it's like, why is this getting worse? Why isn't anyone doing anything? It's like, oh, actually, there's 1.8 million here and 800,000 there, and that's really important. The other thing, and almost more importantly, I think it goes a long way for the allies and the advocates, right? Because they also are kind of on the outside trying to help by providing meals or doing their things and advocating and doing things on Facebook and YouTube and things of that nature. And they too are looking at it from the outside, and they need to have understanding of, hey, these are the policies and the procedures. This is the money that we have. This is where the money isn't here. And this is, this is this person's responsibility. And this is why these things happen. Okay. It's like, no, we're not where we want to be, but there are really good agencies and good individuals that are just doing yeoman work to try to solve this issue as much as possible. Folks are not sitting on their hands. And so I'm eternally appreciative of all of you coming on and just sharing that, because I think that is so very important. If we're, as Kirsten said, if everyone was trying to solve it together, it wouldn't be a problem, right? So this is one of the ways where we try to get everyone all on the same page and say, hey, look, this is what's happening. This is how we solve it. If we don't have these resources, more people are going to fall into homelessness, right? And we don't want that. We want to, stop it, and then we want to heal it. So, so that's
just so we often complain about NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Mm-hmm. And Jeff is referencing YIMBYism, which is yes in my backyard. So yes, I want to support programs that help people who are needing housing assistance in my community. So we all want to be YIMBYs.
YIMBY.
Not NIMBYs. Right.
Yeah. Matt, why don't you finish this off? We kind of co-opted your time there.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
No, we're all on the same team here. I didn't feel co-opted at all. I felt like it was a good conversation. So no apology necessary, Kirsten. I always appreciate the context. So no, I think, I got the major announcements out. I think the biggest thing, maybe to end on is kind of what Kirsten was saying, and what a lot of us, I think, are doing really well, and give a lot of credit, to Jill and her leadership, and Tony is bringing a lot of us together, and Kirsten especially, bringing a lot of us together to work on big projects, because you're right. Alone, most of our nonprofit agencies alone are pretty small, right, relative to some of the bigger players across the pond in Seattle, and so I think it's the way we do big stuff is together, and there is a lot right now that we are trying to work on together, and I hope, Marwan, we'll have some announcements soon of some bigger projects, but that attitude is infectious, and it's happening. And there's a lot of really good examples of that with outreach, with the foster program, with our KEPA programs, right? And if we keep doing that, that is a recipe to have a much bigger impact than we could ever have alone. So I think that's really what we want to continue to do at KCR in 2023 is work together with the community.
I love it. Well, everyone, we're getting ready to end. I just wanted to make sure that everyone remembers Project Connect is coming up. Please stay tuned if you are subscribed to the Conduit or you're following Gather Together, Grow Together. We will put out some more information. We've reached 3,601 people through sharing about Project Connect, and we've had 181 engagements. So we'll put out another one next week so that you have that. We're going to be doing more of this year, and so we're excited to see how many people were responsive uh, on social media this go around. So looks like that's a success. We will continue to do that. Again, make sure you subscribe to the Conduit because you will get news here first. It's one of the reasons why we love Katie, because she likes to give us the news first. And that's great. And you know what? I'm going to give Katie the last word today.
Oh, I will only say there's lots of good things coming up this year, specifically this month. There's lots of events, especially the last week of January. So I'll just reiterate that Project Connect is happening, point in time count is happening. Then the end of that week on the 27th is the project-based voucher waitlist opening. Lots of opportunities to get resources. And if you are rent burdened, if you are paying more than 30% of your rent, consider, finding these resources now before it's too late.
All right, you heard it here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kill this show because I have to go testify at Olympia. Well, virtually, that is. So, for Jill Stanton, Katie Sharp, Matt Garrett, and Kirsten Jewell, I am Marwan Cameron. This is the Conduit Conversations with Housing. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.